Welcome back to the Talk Your Tail Off podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa, more commonly known as Girl with the Dogs, and today's episode is all about nightmare boss stories, as well as everything about my very good friend Caitlin, who I met in the grooming industry, and her experience working in veterinary medicine. Hey, Caitlin.
Hey, hola.
So we met when we were working at a grooming salon, the first and only grooming salon that I ever worked at. And you made an impression on me the first moment that I met you. You are a hilarious human being, and everybody deserves to know you, especially know you because Caitlin is the owner of the famous Meatball.
Yes, I am.
Meatball the pug, which you can see on my TikTok or YouTube videos. And you also have a pug named Charlie.
Yes, I do.
And you have a St. Bernard.
Yes, I do.
And you have how many cats?
4.
This is my kind of person, an animal person. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into the grooming industry, how you got into veterinary medicine.
Okay, well, it's kind of a long story. So when I was 17 and I graduated from high school, I decided I wanted to be a veterinary technician. So I went to school for a year. And unfortunately, that didn't pan out that 1 year. I decided to take a break and maybe focus on myself and what I really wanted to do. So doing that brought me to the grooming salon where I met Vanessa. I worked there for about a year before she made her appearance. So I worked there for a couple of years and decided to go off on my own to learn to groom, which I think we'll further get into. So I groomed for about 6 years full time. 2 or 3 years part-time, and in between that, I decided to go back into the vet world. And that's when I decided, maybe I should do reception. I love doing the admin stuff for the grooming. I love working with clients directly, and I love working with animals. So I got a job as a veterinary receptionist, and then eventually I decided that was my path all along, and so that's where I'm at right now.
Do you remember the first day meeting me or not really? I guess that was a long time ago.
I think I remember you bringing in your resume. I remember that because, again, I did a lot of the admin stuff at this grooming salon.
And when I first started working there, it was a great environment.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody seemed super happy. The boss was really, really wonderful to me.
Yeah.
And then things kind of started taking a turn. And I think that it started first with you.
Yes. So I will say a little bit of background. When I got the job there, the lady told me she was going to teach me to groom. So when she hired Vanessa, I was mad at Vanessa, which is not her fault whatsoever, but she decided, hey, I'm going to teach Vanessa how to groom, whereas I worked there for a year at that time, and I felt I was next in line to learn how to groom. So that was very disappointing for me and very hard on me. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what did I do wrong?
When I started working there, I had no idea of any of this. I didn't know that Caitlin was supposed to learn how to groom. I thought Caitlin was the receptionist as well as a grooming assistant. So this is information I didn't know. I ended up figuring this out later on. And that's when Caitlin and I started getting really close and we started becoming really good friends. And then I learned a little more about, what was going on behind the scenes.
I was new to the grooming world at that time, so I had no experience. I didn't know what kind of tools you were supposed to use, how you're supposed to groom. It was all a learning curve for both of us at that time because we were both new to the grooming world. So there were definitely incidences where I don't believe she groomed correctly. I think I learned this when I went off to school, but there was times where she would use a comb to get mats out instead of a slicker brush, or she would use the blow dryers from
Shoppers Drug Mart.
yeah. And not the high velocity dryers. If anyone has grooming experience, try grooming or blow drying a Cocker Spaniel fully with a hair dryer and tell me how it goes.
Yeah. And like that wasn't good for the animals.
No.
And the thing is you and I both didn't know any better because all that we knew from grooming came entirely from her.
Yes.
So we thought this is just the way to do things. And I learned a lot afterwards simply by looking at Facebook groups, talking to other groomers, watching grooming videos. And I realized that there was a lot of easier ways to do things and really great equipment to invest in. One of the things that this lady did, and I do want to preface this by saying I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to work there and that she taught me how to groom, because had I not gotten into that, I never would have learned how to groom. So there is a piece of me that is very grateful for meeting her. But then there's also pieces of me that kind of wish I could erase that whole thing from my memory.
Yeah.
So going back to those handheld dryers, for example, she would get very upset if those broke.
Yes.
Very, very upset. And it would always be, well, it broke because they don't clean out the filters.
It was always our fault.
Everything was always somebody else's fault versus herself. So these handheld dryers were not designed to be on for 8 hours a day grooming. Seriously, how many dogs did we groom in a day?
A lot, especially when Vanessa started and got fully trained. You guys were doing like what, 18 to 22 a day?
I think we were doing more than that. I feel as though we did almost 30 dogs a day at that point. So one of the things about Kay is that she was very keen on saving money. Let's call her Kay so that people can understand who we're referring to. So Kay. But I don't think that she realized that she was actually losing money because she refused to invest in good equipment. And if you refuse to invest in good equipment, then you're not getting your best bang out of your buck, really. So it was taking us a lot longer to groom dogs. We probably could have groomed a lot more dogs in a day had she invested in the proper equipment or learned how to groom properly. And she was somebody where if you had ideas, you couldn't bring your ideas to her. And that's just to preface this for anybody who wants to run a business. Something I've learned about running a business is that you want to hire people that know how to do your job better than you. Because if you hire people that know how to do your job better than you, or certain aspects of the job, for example, I'm hiring a grooming assistant. If that grooming assistant knows how to do the grooming assistant job better than I would know how to do it, you want to take those lessons and learn and grow and just be a better and more successful business. If you think you know all of the answers and you're the only one that knows the answers, your business is going to stay here where it could be up here. Though I've just learned, even in content creation, for example, hire someone that knows how to edit better than you do. It's your content, you've been editing it for so long, but if you hire someone that knows how to edit better than you do, then your content is going to be that much better. And that goes for any type of job that goes for any entrepreneur. You want to hire people that can do things better than you to make your business better and learn from people. She did not have the capability of doing that.
Yeah. And I remember it being a traumatic experience for my own dog. Like, I had a little King Charles Spaniel, and that's how I learned to groom, was on him. And he would have mats in his ears at times, and she taught me to get those mats out with the comb. And so in the future, every time I went to bring the comb up to him to do something else, he would freak out because it was such a painful experience from the past.
Getting mats out, you can either just cut them out. Half the time I just cut them out because it's easier on the dog just to cut them out. Other than that, you have tools such as the dematter, which cuts them so that they're easier to brush. And then of course you start with the slicker brush and then you go to the comb. And these were not things that we were taught.
No.
So naturally a few things were more traumatizing to the dogs than it needed to be.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I remember there were certain dogs that came in that weren't the greatest to groom. And she used to swear up and down when they came in, get so stressed, make the workplace a really toxic place for us.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if you stay positive and you try to make it a good environment for everyone, then we can get through it as a team. But if you're going to have a meltdown every time this one dog comes through, we're all going to be like, oh my gosh, this dog is coming in today. Kay's going to have a meltdown.
But also, if you have a dog that you dislike grooming that much because they're very difficult, just don't groom them. Just tell the client you can't groom them. It's really that simple. This dog causes me far too much stress. It's completely reasonable. The dog is extremely poorly behaved. So just stop grooming it.
Talk to your veterinarian. If you have a dog that is getting overly stressed at the groomer, go to them because they might be able to suggest something that can help with that.
Things started to really go downhill at that salon. It was already a very toxic, stressful environment. But right before you left, it got really bad. And I will be honest and say that a lot of the way that she treated you made me extremely uncomfortable, which we've discussed it. Looking back at it, I wish I was a little bit older when I worked there because I really would have spoke my mind. But because I was 18 or 19 at the time, I was, insecure and shy and didn't, want to overstep my boundaries. But there were some horrible moments where it still bothers me thinking about it, and I'm sure it still bothers you thinking about it.
Yeah, it's definitely traumatic. I think you're probably thinking about the chair incident.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a person who blocks things out when they get really bad. So you might have to refresh me on some of it. I do remember parts,
This is the worst incident that happened at that place, for sure.
but I think I broke a chair, the front
Yes.
desk chair. That's what happened.
Yes.
I sat on it and it was an old chair.
An old office chair.
Yeah. And I sat on it and it just broke and she lost it.
She lost it, but in a passive aggressive way.
Yeah.
She turned to me because Caitlin was working up front as the receptionist, and there was a wall, and then her and I were working behind the wall. Kay and I were working behind the wall. So Caitlin couldn't really hear what she was saying, but she broke the chair, and you fell on the ground.
Yeah.
And my first instinct was like, oh my God, is she okay? And Kay's first instinct was to turn around and say, I don't know why I'm going to buy another one because she's just going to break that one too. And it was like really disheartening to hear her say that because you are seriously one of the kindest people that I know. You treated everybody in there with respect and kindness. There was no reason to speak that way about you. And it was just outright disgusting.
Well, it was like directed at my weight. So I'm glad to say I have lost 130 pounds.
You look amazing.
Thank you. But at the time I was heavier. So there's no reason for anyone to comment on anyone's weight, especially your boss. There's no reason for it. Everyone is beautiful in their own ways. And I'm a very confident person, even being a bigger girl. But back then I wasn't. And so that totally destroyed me.
It got worse. That's not even, it gets worse. So you apologized to her over and over and over again for breaking this chair, which I don't feel you needed to apologize for. First of all, it was a cheap old office chair. Like, who cares? Number one. Number two, it was an accident. You didn't intentionally break her chair.
No.
So for you to have to apologize for that. So Caitlin is continuously apologizing and Kay is not responding. She's not saying anything. She didn't say, it's okay, like, don't worry about it. She just stayed completely silent, which made it very evident that she was angry about the situation. It was so uncomfortable. I just remember feeling sick to my stomach. And then the next day, you came in with a new chair.
Yes.
Which still to this day, I can't believe you did that. She comes in with a new chair because she felt so guilty for breaking the chair.
Yeah.
Kay did not say thank you.
No.
She did not acknowledge the chair.
No.
And then at the end of the day, she told you to take the chair home because she was getting another one.
Yep. And she didn't like that chair. That chair wasn't good enough.
I have no words. I really have no words. The whole event, that whole thing, I don't know how you didn't walk out the doors that day.
Honestly, I'm like such a fixer. Like, I just want to make everyone happy all the time. So I'm like, oh gosh, I broke this chair. I feel so guilty. So I went out, bought a new chair. She hated the chair.
And it wasn't the chair. It was the fact that you tried to rectify something that happened and she didn't want to acknowledge and be kind and thank you for your efforts. She wanted to continuously shame you for the situation and make you feel bad about it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just disgusting. So eventually, shortly after that, I don't think anything else really happened. Shortly after that, you quit, right?
Yeah. So, as I said before, she promised she was going to teach me to groom. It wasn't happening. I decided for myself the best thing to do was to go to grooming school to learn to groom. If she wasn't going to teach me to groom, that's fine. Then I'm going to better myself by going to a school to learn to groom. So I did go to grooming school. I gave my 2 weeks notice. But when I did that, she was not happy with me. And I remember her texting me and telling me not to come in anymore. She didn't even let me work my last 2 weeks. She made such a big stink about it. And I remember at the time, I think I was still talking to the other assistant, and she told me that she said that I would never make it as a groomer.
She said the same thing to me. She said, when you told her you were going to grooming school, she turned to me again in that room where Caitlin couldn't hear me and said, she's not ready. You were more ready than the average person going to grooming school because you already had a ton of knowledge
I
working in a
know.
grooming salon.
When I went to grooming school, I like surpassed the bathing, that's for sure.
A++.
Yeah. I will say when I went, I learned how to properly demat a dog, how to properly dry a dog. And I remember my mind just being blown away. I was like, it's this easy.
It is that easy. And
Yeah.
she made everything more difficult.
Yeah.
So after you left, things started to get bad for me.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to start grooming from home. And it's so ridiculous when I look back on this. But if any clients of hers called me, I would tell them, I can't groom your dog because you bring your dog to Kay and Kay is my boss and that's a conflict of interest. So I refuse to groom your dog. Kay was nobody to me. She was a woman who hired me, taught me how to groom, and I worked extremely hard for her. And I got paid minimum wage, maybe $1 more than minimum wage as a groomer. That's unheard of, by the way. Most groomers make at least 50% commission off of every dog they groom plus tips. I didn't get that. I worked for, my God, if I look back on that, maybe $12 an hour as a groomer.
Yeah. Well, I remember when you started off, you didn't get paid at all.
I worked for 3 months for free.
That's how it worked. Yeah.
But she eventually said, okay, like you're trained as a groomer now, so I'm going to start paying you. But regardless, I was getting paid minimum wage as a groomer, which is not anything of what you're supposed to be getting paid for that job. And I was doing a good job and I was very, very fast.
Yes, you were.
So one of the first incidences that happened, and keep in mind that she trained me how to groom and it was my job to groom very quickly. And when you're a groomer starting out, you really shouldn't be grooming very quickly because you're still learning. So I injured a dog and this dog had to go to the vet and get stitches. And she told me she was going to take that out of my pay. I was going to be responsible for the vet bill and she was going to take it out of my pay. And I didn't say anything to her. I went home. I spoke to my uncle who worked for the labor board. And my uncle told me that's illegal. She's supposed to have insurance to cover these types of things. She can't take money out of her employee's pocket to pay for vet bills. So I went back into work and I told her that I wouldn't be paying for that vet bill because it was illegal. And she was livid.
Oh my gosh, I can only
Livid.
imagine.
All that woman cared about was money. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, that's all she cared about. That started to affect our relationship a little bit and she started acting differently towards me. And then I started grooming from home after that. And I kept it a secret because I knew obviously she wasn't going to be okay with it. Keep in mind, I was only grooming maybe 1 or 2 dogs a week at this point, and I was 19 years old, and it was basically paying for my gas, essentially. And I had a sign out front that had the name of my business, which at the time was Perfect Pooch's Dog Grooming. And I remember one Christmas, I left to go home and I forgot to take home my Christmas bandanas for my dogs. So she dropped them off in my mailbox, but she didn't tell me she was dropping them off in my mailbox, and she saw the sign out front.
Oh, is that how that
That's
happened? Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
So she dropped off the bandanas and I found them and I texted her saying, thank you so much for the bandanas. And she didn't text me back. And I realized at that moment she saw the sign
Oh
out front.
no.
So again, very passive aggressive individual. When I came back from Christmas break, she pretended like nothing happened, like she didn't see it, but she was acting very passive aggressive towards me, very uncomfortable. That environment was hell. I
Yeah.
have nightmares sometimes that I'm still working there.
Well, like I said, when some dogs came in, like you did not want to be there that day.
No.
No.
And again, if you hate grooming that dog so much, just stop grooming it.
Yeah.
But anyways, so she started acting very differently towards me, and she would bring up things subtly, such as my vet told me that a groomer opened up in her neighborhood.
Of course she did it that
And
way.
her vet was my vet, and her vet lived in my neighborhood. So I knew she was talking about me. She knew that I knew that she was talking about me. It made for a very uncomfortable environment. She started acting really weird towards me. And I get it. I became your competition. But I just want to preface this by saying I actually skipped over an entirely important part. She asked if I would be willing to buy her business because she wanted to retire. I forgot about this part. And when I looked at her books and how much money she was making, it's not that she wasn't making any money. It's just the amount that she was asking for to buy her clientele, which when you buy a business like that with a clientele, you are never promised that that client is actually going to come to you. So when I looked at this, I didn't have the money to buy it. My grandfather and my mother didn't want to give me the money to buy it because they said to me, you're 19 years old. You can make a business for yourself. You can start out on your own. You can make your own name. You don't need to go into debt to buy this business in order to be successful. You can be successful on your own. And they are entrepreneurs and are very smart and very successful. So of course I'm going to take their advice to heart and do whatever it is that they tell me to do. So when I told Kay that I wouldn't be buying her business, that's when her attitude changed towards me. That's when she started treating me differently.
Oh.
Prior to that, she was like the mother I never had. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have a great mom. But she was like the second mom.
Yeah.
The second mom that I never had. And as soon as I told her I wasn't buying her business, everything changed. So she was retiring. So I guess when I decided to open up my own grooming salon, I never really thought it was that big of a deal because she was intending on leaving the industry. So if you're leaving the industry, keep in mind she was in her 60s, guys. If you're leaving the industry, why do you care if another grooming salon is opening up around the corner?
Yeah.
Just didn't make much sense to me. When I quit, she asked me if I was going to be there for Christmas. And because the environment was so toxic, I didn't want to be there anymore. Especially with Caitlin being gone, she was my best friend there. And when she left, it was very depressing. I was like, I don't have anybody that I like here anymore. That was another part of it. So I told her I don't think I'm going to be there for Christmas rush. And then she ended up calling me or texting me one day after I left because no conversation ever happened in person.
No.
She was non-confrontational, could not tell you how she really felt in person. Everything was done through text. So she texted me and said that it wasn't busy enough and she didn't need me anymore, which was hilarious because it was summertime, which is one of the busiest seasons of the year. And she knew that I knew that. So she knew that I knew that she was lying. But I didn't want to work there anymore anyway, so it was perfect for me. So she said, I don't need you anymore. I'm going to lay you off because, of course, she doesn't want to fire me because if she fires me, then she'd have to pay me severance pay, right?
Oh.
So instead, she laid me off, which I knew was firing me. And I said to her, okay, can you mail me my last check? Of course not. Of course not. She wasn't going to mail me my last check. She made me go in there to pick it up, specifically because I think she thought in her head, if I make her pick it up, she's not going to show up for it. But I showed up for it, guys. I picked up that check and I hugged her goodbye because I am a better person than that.
Good for you, girl.
So that was, yeah, some of the nightmare stories. I'm sure there's lots more,
Oh gosh, yes.
but those are the biggest ones that stood out for me.
Yes, it definitely was not a fun time.
Oh, wait, I left out something. So she was your typical Karen neighbor. So if you had children that were outside having fun, enjoying their life, she would call the city because they were being too loud.
Really?
She used to tell me stories all the time about how she would call the city on everybody.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness.
So when I left, all of a sudden I got a letter in the mail because she called the city on my business. She thought that I wasn't registered, but I did register my business because I knew, well, you have to register your business anyways for legal purposes, but I also knew I can't do this under the table because she is the type of person that will call the government and say that I'm running this business to try to get me shut down. So I made sure I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's before I started this business. So I think she did call the government to try to say that I was, making money under the table, cash under the table, which didn't work because I was registered and paying my taxes. And then she called the city on my sign out front, my sign that said Perfect Pooch's Dog Grooming. And I had to take that sign down because when you're in a residential neighborhood where I am located, you can run a business from home. It's legal, but you can't have signage out front. That's not legal. You can't deface the image of your home for the business or something like that. So anyways, yeah, it wasn't over when I quit. She continued to call the city on me and try to make my life even more difficult. You know what's funny? We know that she watches the news, and I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when she saw me on the news for my TikTok channel. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, I know. I said that to you. I remember when I saw you on the news, the first thing that popped into my head was that she was going to see you. But I am so proud of how successful you have
Thank you.
become, and I hope that she sees you.
I'm still grateful that she came into my life and taught me how to groom. She just wasn't a very nice person. And I don't even care about any of the things that she did or say to me. What she did to you that day changed every part of the way that I felt about her. It was just so incredibly disgusting how she treated you and so sickening. And I would never, ever, ever treat anybody like that, especially you. I still. So that changed the way that I felt about her that day.
And the best part, though, is when she said to me, well, not to me, to the other girl, that I was never going to make it as a groomer, that pushed me 100 times faster.
Yeah.
I made sure that my poodles looked better than her poodles. My schnauzers looked better than her schnauzers. Like,
So
I
funny.
worked so hard to make sure that I was a better groomer than that lady because she pushed me to that point.
Then it's funny because then I opened my business and then I needed an assistant and you became my assistant and we
Yes.
started working together.
Yes.
And our working environment was fantastic.
Yeah, it was.
We had so much
Yeah.
fun. Even when the difficult dogs came in,
Yeah.
we still had fun.
Yeah.
When they were being bad and it was stressing us out, we just turned that into a laughing situation and we would laugh about it. And working with you was awesome.
Aw, working with you is awesome.
I hope I was a better boss
Yeah,
than Kay.
you were. That was when I went part-time, and then eventually I decided to focus on the veterinary industry. And I gave up grooming. I'm a retired groomer now.
Except for your own dogs here and there.
I know. I tried to pawn them off. I really do.
I get it. I would pawn mine
Yeah.
off too. But this is a good segment to get into veterinary medicine because a lot of people really have no idea what it's like to work in the vet field. And even though I've never worked in the vet field, I have two best friends that do, so I hear all kinds of stories. And I understand how hard it is.
Yeah.
So the first question really is, what credentials do you need in order to be a veterinary receptionist?
So a receptionist in general, you don't need any other than a high school diploma. But I would say there's skills you definitely need to have. A huge one is multitasking. Another one is organization skills. You're going to have to like clients. Even though you work in a veterinary office, you're the first face that they see when they walk through those doors. So you have to have a good relationship with your clients. And obviously, you have to love animals.
The clients must love you because you are so bubbly and
Yeah.
happy. You must make everybody's day when they walk through the door.
Well, I try. There's times where things aren't easy there. I love my job, don't get me wrong. I would never give it up, but there are days that are hard. The veterinary industry can be a very difficult place to work in when you have those bad days, but then there's the good times that make up for it as well. So
What's the hardest part, you think, working, not even just as a receptionist, but in general, working in the veterinary field? What do you feel is the hardest job or hardest part about it?
I would probably say the emergency part of it. I would personally never work in emergency medicine. When we have urgent cases come in and we see the dog or cat at their worst. But then it also can be the best part of your job because they come back or they leave better.
You save them,
You save
essentially.
them. Yeah. So like in the moment, the beginning parts of it, it's definitely all hands on deck and you're just focusing on that situation. Another part is loss, euthanasias, the ones you can't save. It's hard when you build a relationship specifically with your clients and those patients, and the day comes where you have to say goodbye. I had a patient I lost to euthanasia recently, and she was one of my pug clients.
Oh no.
And I have a really good relationship with her mom, and it was very, very difficult because the hard part in veterinary reception is you go in the room and you have them sign the documents to go forward. You go over earn choices, aftercare choices, etc. Then you have to go back up front and put a smile on your face. I'm lucky because the veterinarian I work for now is very, very good. Well, my manager in specific with mental health. She understands how severe mental health can be in the industry. So she will give me those moments to have those moments of sadness and grief. But sometimes you're so busy, you have to put a smile on your face and go back up front. You have no choice. So I find that really difficult because you're up and down, up and down. And sometimes you don't have those moments to grieve until you go home and you take it home with you, which I'm bad
You're
for.
getting better at it, though.
Yes, I am.
You're
I
getting
am.
stronger.
Yeah.
But what I really want to know, and what I kind of think I already do know, is what is the biggest misconception about veterinary medicine?
Okay, well, I would say is my biggest pet peeve is when I have people say that we do it for the money. That is completely incorrect. I will give you a little bit of background on what I see those veterinarians and veterinary technicians go through in a day. Imagine your family doctor having to do surgery, not just spays and neuters, but like lumpectomies, cystotomies, like really big surgeries in the morning,
Dental.
dental surgery. Then those technicians have to control the general anesthetic. We don't have anesthesiologists that come in. They have to do x-rays, radiographs, read those, blood work on animals that don't want to have blood work done, but we have to do it because if they don't have it done, then guess what? We're not going to know what's going on because animals can't talk. They have to do examinations and annual checkups and regular appointments after they do surgeries. Like those doctors do not sit down. Those technicians do not sit down. Like it is crazy. Plus, they have all those patients that are being hospitalized at the same time that they have to take care of, the appointments coming in and out of the building. I like your family doctor doesn't do any of that. Ultrasounds. We also have our own pharmacy. So they're pharmacy technicians, in my opinion, as well. So there's a lot of work that goes into veterinary medicine in one day that those doctors and technicians have to do on a regular basis.
Well, my vet goes into work at around 7 a.m. and she doesn't get home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I know that because sometimes she'll drop medication off to me because I have, ACE, that's just a medical disaster. And so she'll drop meds off to me and she'll say, okay, I'm just leaving the clinic now, dropping the meds off. And it's sometimes 10 o'clock at night. And I'm thinking to myself, you've been at the clinic since 7 o'clock this morning. Do you have a life? And the truth is, she really doesn't. She can't have any pets because she's not home to take care of them. So she's a woman that loves animals, but can't have any of her own because she's not there to take care of them, because she's constantly working and taking care of everybody else's pet. And she is a relatively inexpensive vet compared to other vets. She, in my opinion, doesn't charge enough. I couldn't imagine doing all of that, but not to mention all the work that's involved, but the overhead cost.
Mm-hmm.
People think that veterinarians are millionaires, and it's so sad because I think the average veterinarian in Canada makes around $120,000 to $130,000 a year clear. Plus, they have to pay taxes on that.
Well, I've been told that the new graduates from vet school from Guelph are actually not asking for more pay, but more vacation time now.
I don't blame them.
Yeah.
And they also, when they come out of school, have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt,
Mm-hmm.
and they are not making millions of dollars a year. So to be able to pay that off is already going to take an extremely long time. It's very frustrating to me when people complain about the cost of veterinary care, because I know all of this information and what it takes to run a practice, the amount of time and money invested and all that. For example, all of the equipment to do x-rays and ultrasounds, dentals, that equipment isn't cheap.
No.
It's extremely expensive.
Like if we have to bandage a dog, there's the bandage material we have to pay for. If there's blood going to the laboratory fees we have to pay for. There's a lot that goes into it. Your aftercare, they go to a crematorium after. We have to pay for that. So I don't think people realize how much cost is involved running a veterinary clinic. Yeah, and I will say one thing. I work in the industry. I don't know if I would ever be an actual veterinarian. Those doctors are so amazing that I work for, though. I see them, they get right on the ground with the dogs. They they come back and they love on those animals so much, and they do everything in their power to save lives every single day. They are the most incredible people I've ever met in my life.
Selfless people.
Yes.
The way that I feel is when I hear clients complain about the cost of veterinary care, knowing what I know, and I hope a lot of the people who complain about veterinary care see this episode because they really don't understand. And I'm going to have a vet on here to discuss more in
Really?
detail all of this because it needs to be said. But if you can't afford an animal, don't have an animal. It's really just, that's what it comes down to. I understand that everybody wants pets. Everybody has the right to have pets. Pets make your life better. But if you cannot afford their medical care, it is not the veterinarian's fault.
Well, we get sometimes calls that people are blaming us for them not being able to afford veterinary services. And I do sympathize. I have been personally involved with rescuing multiple pets that come in and the people can't pay for severe surgeries such as pyometras. So I end up having them surrender the pet to me and I pay for their care. I know there's different employees I work with that do the same thing and have done the same thing in the past. Plus, I have all my own animals I have to pay for. And as you heard at the beginning of the episode, I have quite a few.
I feel like you acquired quite a few of those
Yeah.
through these instances
Yeah.
at work.
Yeah.
It's a good thing you work for a vet. And
Yeah.
of course, having insurance is very helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I recommend getting pet insurance, especially when you first get a pet and they're a puppy, because if you get pet insurance when they're 5 and they have an ACL tear, they're not going to cover that. So make sure to get your pet insurance early. It also costs less if you get it when they are puppies. And that way, if you run into emergencies or let's say your dog has a regular ear infection, after your deductible is paid, then they cover that for the rest of the dog's life. So it's important because that definitely makes a huge difference in being able to afford veterinary care. I remember actually this was one of the first days I worked as a veterinary receptionist. I had a 10-week-old German Shepherd puppy come rushing into my work at the end of a Saturday morning shift, and it ate poison or drank poison out of the grandparents' backyard.
Oh no, did he live? Oh, that's
No,
horrible.
it was awful. And the dog was seizing. It was a whole thing. And honestly, that has always stuck with me. Um, yeah. And now I can handle a lot of things in veterinary medicine, maggots, fleas, ticks, like any like crazy tumors on bones. That doesn't freak me out, but seizing. And I think it has to do with that one example, that one day when I started working in the veterinary office and I saw that puppy come in seizing, and now it just totally freaks me out.
A seizure is very scary to watch, for
Mhm.
sure. So I get that. And then if somebody was interested in getting into veterinary medicine, whether that was being a receptionist or being a tech or being an assistant or being a vet, what would you tell them? What would be your best advice to tell them?
Anyone starting out, start off at a one doctor practice,
How come?
because it's not as crazy. Right now, I work for a 5 doctor practice and it's craziness. I love it though. Like I said, develop skills. Understand that there's a huge learning curve. You have to learn the vaccines to the back of your hand, how they work. You have to understand veterinary language. You will also have to understand signs of certain emergencies. Like, for example, a cat. If you have a call and a cat is open mouth breathing, well, if you don't understand that, like, if you don't have a background understanding that this is an emergency, any cat open mouth breathing should be brought in right away. Or a male cat that is straining to urinate, that's another emergency. So it's definitely a huge learning curve that you have to do for it took me probably a good year to learn all that stuff. Flea and tick medication, you have to know at the back of your hand. Understanding medications and what they're for, like cephalexin, antibiotic. So it's a huge learning curve, but once you get past the learning curve, then it's smooth sailing.
So your best advice would be try to work somewhere that's not as busy to start out.
Exactly. And then eventually you can move on to working for a bigger practice. I recommend veterinary medicine to anyone who loves animals, but understand that you have to know animals in order to work there. There's a difference between liking animals and understanding them. And I think you understand that. And that's where I developed the knowledge so much through behavioral incidences with animals is through grooming, because you have to like look at that dog, and if you know that dog's about to bite you, you have to muzzle it.
You know the signs. When you start working with animals that physically and that routinely, you definitely learn all of the signs of stress and reactivity in advance to keep yourself safe, for sure.
Yes.
Well, I think time is up. I really appreciate you coming in today.
Oh, thank you.
Our discussions about working in a toxic environment, I think, will be helpful to others who might be going through the same thing, because grooming salons as well as vet clinics can be very toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great that you love where you work, because it took you a while to get there.
Yes, it did.
And I hope that I was able to be a good boss to you and all of my other employees, because if you have a miserable boss, you have a miserable life.
Yes.
All right, everyone. So that's it for today's episode. Tune in next week for a very heartwarming episode where I interview the most influential person in my life. This is going to be one special episode that you do not want to miss. Thank you all for listening. And thank you, Caitlin, for
Thank
being a guest today.
Thank you for having me.
You did awesome. I'm sure that a lot of people learned a lot from you today.
Oh, thank you. I hope so too.
And follow Meatball. I will leave the link below.
Yes.
I'll see you all next week on another episode of Talk Your Tail Off.